Okay, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining our webinar today. Just a quick introduction. My name is Rebecca Lord-Fletcher and I'm the Group Marketing Manager at SGI. So for those attendees who are not familiar with the Source Group and our three brands, we are international recruitment specialists and we specialise across tech and life science recruitment. And at SGI, we're on a mission to achieve the highest level of customer service, driving sustainable improvement and investing in our people. So welcome to one of our Source Talks community events. We launched Source Talks during the height of the pandemic with the objective to bring together experts and leading professionals to discuss the challenges and changes they face across their organisations. So through our meetups and media series, we are pulling back the curtain to technology and talent attraction and building a powerful community of people on the same journey, just like yourselves. So I'm going to hand over to Sana to do our main introduction of today. Thank you.
I'm very delighted to have Robert Hartskeerl as our speaker today, ex-Microsoft and co-founder of Data Fellows. Robert is really Switzerland when it comes to an unbiased proposition of which data to keep on-prem and which information to move to the cloud. As recent as yesterday, I was in a meeting with him where he advised a very surprised client that not everything has to move to the cloud and that a hybrid on-prem and cloud solution, or even a full-prem solution in this very specific situation could be more beneficial. It doesn't happen very often that you hear a cloud architect say those things. So on that note, I am very pleased to introduce you today, Robert.
Thank you, Sana. Welcome everyone in my session about cloud marketing. Is it fake news? And in the coming 30 minutes, I will take you along with me in my thoughts about what the cloud is, what it is not, and what would be the best way to use it. And I want to point and poke in your brains and in your minds and in your thoughts that maybe what you are doing or maybe what you're thinking today could be something else. I'm not saying that what I advocate here is the truth. I'm merely saying that things could be different and might be different, but it's up to you to decide. As the cloud is becoming well established with companies of all sizes all over the world, now would be a good time to pause and evaluate what a decade of cloud has brought us. Is the cloud holding up to its promise? And to give you a teaser of something that I just recently came by is that Dropbox, I think 3 or 4 years ago, moved the majority of their services from AWS into their own data center. And I will discuss a bit more on why they did and what the reasoning behind this was. But it's an interesting fact to be aware of that large companies like Dropbox, who used the cloud to grow, to scale, use all the benefits that a cloud provider might give you, eventually decided to move back to their own data centers and are very happy with it because this is a quote from 4 or 5 years ago, but there are some more recent quotes on how well they are doing right now and how they have how this was a benefit for them. But first, let's settle on what the cloud is. I'm not aware if everybody knows really what the differences are. On one side, we have the private cloud. For many people, this refers to as their own data center, but it could also be a data center or data center services provided as a managed service by another company. And we have numerous of these as well. On the opposite side, we have the public cloud. The public cloud consists of services provided by a single vendor. The term public is confusing for a lot of people. It means that the availability of these servers are open to everyone. They're not restricted to a single organization. They are not restricted to a single person. In some cases, they are restricted to a single country, but in most cases, the services are available to everyone. And when you consume these services in the public cloud, it doesn't per se mean that they are publicly available. So it doesn't mean that if you move your data into the cloud, your data becomes available to everyone in the world. It just means that the service is publicly available. If you want to present the data to everyone in the world, that's the choice you have to make for yourself. You can put in the boundaries and the restriction on when, how, and what data you want to share with the rest of the world. And then between them is the hybrid cloud. And the hybrid cloud is the combination of private and public cloud by enabling network connections, all sorts of things, virtual private networks. And we have all these different combinations and possibilities to get the best of both worlds. Or to ease into a migration, especially if you're a larger company, you will not move to the cloud in one big bang. Another differentiator that's not directly on this slide, but that sets the public cloud apart from the private cloud is that it's much more services oriented. The private cloud has a strong focus on compute capacity. Private cloud or your on-premise world typically consists of virtual machines and iron in your data center. And then people in your organization build services on top of that. The public cloud, on the other hand, provides services, and that's how they deliver their promise to make it scalable and to make it always available. Whether it's platform as a service or software as a service or even infrastructure as a service, the major difference is they really focus on delivering the service on demand, pay per use, and scale up and out when needed. Now, what is the promise of the cloud? And is there actually a promise of the cloud, or is it just hope? Is it smart marketing combined with non-optimal businesses and the fear of missing out? Because that's what I see often as well. The drive to move to the cloud is fueled by processes within the business not working at the moment or not giving the desired result, hoping that the cloud will fix this at some point. Having unlimited storage capacity, being able to deploy services across the globe and saving on capital investment, that's the promise what the cloud brings. But the cloud has what it takes to transform your business from just some company to becoming a strong competitor and becoming an innovative company for that's a great company to work for your employees as well. People want to work at businesses or companies that are innovative, that are making a difference, that are trying to work with edge technologies. But you need to be aware that in order to do so, in order to gain from these benefits, you as an organization have to make the choice on how to use them and how to optimally use them, because that is eventually what is going to make the difference. Going to the cloud or transitioning to the cloud isn't simply just moving whatever you have right now and then install it into the cloud. It's the same as becoming an agile organization or an agile team isn't the same as just appointing someone as a scrum master. There's more to it. There's more processes. There's more procedures. In the past 10 years that I'm working with the cloud now, I've seen 3 types of organizations trying to adopt the cloud. So first, startups. Startups and small businesses, they identify, or they can be identified, that they have no legacy services. They have no legacy components. They have no infrastructure. They have an ID and they want to build on that ID. That ID will be typically cloud native. And because they desire to grow, but not taking any financial risks, the cloud is a good fit for them. It offers the pay-per-use model, and they have a minimal investment upfront, and they can still grow and scale whenever they need to. Then next are the independent software vendors, or ISVs. And ISVs are companies that have a service already. They already have a software solution in place. They already have a customer base, but they're serving this software solution from their own data center, or they're serving it as a client server application installed inside the customer's network. What the cloud enables them to do is to move these services into the cloud and provide them from the cloud and manage them from the cloud, and not having to worry about the infrastructure themselves. So they can focus on the service they deliver instead of also worrying about the infrastructure underneath their service. And then typically what you end up with is software as a service, a SaaS offering. And then on the far end of the spectrum, we would have large enterprises. Large enterprises, typically what we see there, have a lot of legacy, have strict rules, have strict regulations, have security processes in place, have huge amounts of data that they want to unlock to get new insights into the data, to become more data driven, and to become a company that really can make the difference into today's world. Their challenge is how to adopt this new and open world of always connected from anywhere. And typically, really in the pandemic we are in right now, everybody's working from home, everybody's working from anywhere, maybe at any time. How can we make sure that these people are all doing this in a secure way and doing it in a way that they should be doing it? What is interesting to realize when you look at these three types of company is that for the last 10 years that I've been doing this, is that this is a timeline as well. In the first year, startups ran most of the loads, while other companies were trying to adopt cloud-like solutions in their own data centers. I think every large organization, the enterprises on the right, all at some point beginning 2000 to 2005, have been looking at adopting Hadoop file clusters or something like that. Typical workloads that would run in the public cloud, but then try to run that in their own data center. And then the ISVs try to focus try to move their focus to delivering software instead of delivering infrastructure and software. And often what we've seen that is that that's a reaction to the startups, because the startups were moving into the same space, same software solutions that the ISVs were already in. But the startups had the advantage that they didn't have any legacy, they didn't have to transform anything, and they could start with a blank slate, with a clean slate. They could build something that would really benefit the customer, while the ISVs had to transform something into a new technology. And then for the past 3 years, I think I'm working with much more enterprises to see how they can adopt the cloud or how they can transition their data sources, data offerings to a cloud environment. But not every move to the cloud delivers on the promise. Of course, it all starts with a clear vision on why you want to move to the cloud. Most startups and ISVs, they have a very well-defined reason to move to the cloud. But for larger organizations, things become a bit more fuzzy. Not everyone has the same perception or urgency why to move to the cloud is made. Most organizations cannot simply move everything to the cloud. So a hybrid form is essential, but a hybrid form also comes with its own challenges. Again, not making the adoption any easier. What all organizations I've worked with, large or small, have in common is that they find it difficult to get started. What technology to choose, what limitations are there, and how to handle security. Often I see companies not getting the result they want, not paying the price they hope for. In other words, the cloud is not faster, and it's certainly not cheaper. So is it fake news, or are cloud vendors luring us in with their data centers and their success stories? Well, I don't think they are. Take startups, for example. They are eager to enter the market with a new platform, but some of these platforms are just ideas. There's no strategy on how to get there from a technical level. There's just a cloud, and typically what we see startups doing is that, or some startups, not all, but some of them doing, they just click around into whatever cloud they chose, up until the point they get the result they wanted. But that isn't just the most optimal solution. It might be much more expensive than what they hope for, or it might have a performance impact as well, or even a security or a data governance impact as well. And then for ISV, it's a different story. They already have the software, they already have the design, a client-server application where everything is installed on a customer location, or enabled through a remote desktop session. And their move to the cloud is moving the services to the cloud. Usually a database server that can easily be moved, and then they build a web application on top of that, or on top of an old application they already have, and create a modern architecture. But by just moving to the cloud and maybe rewriting parts of your code to enable the new database location, for example, you are not adopting the cloud. You are just simply moving your infrastructure somewhere else. Now, for enterprises, the story is completely different. Their struggle with the cloud is often not just the cloud, it's the legacy way of working and thinking. Often cloud adoption at large organizations start with architects and security engineers working out what can and cannot be done within the cloud, and network engineers designing how to extend the on-premise network to the cloud and how to deal with public services that are connected to the internet. And all that with a cloud infrastructure that's constantly changing. Developers are frustrated by the slowness of the architects or the limitations put in place by the security team. And while this is all done with the best intentions, the question remains if it's the most optimal way to adopt the cloud, and moving to the cloud does align with the business goals. Now, let me circle back to the story about Dropbox. They decided to move away from the cloud to their own data center. One of the reasons was to get back more control. They wanted to have a tight control about the services they were running and how they were running them. Not so much from a security perspective, but much more from knowing what's going on there. Now, to move a massive amount of data back to your own infrastructure from the cloud, while keeping all these services online and none of the customers actually knowing that this is going on, provide the same degree of availability and security that you had in the cloud, that's of course a huge and impressive undertaking. Another interesting point they highlighted is that the cloud is a generic solution. It's a one-size-fits-all solution, and it did not fit their specific requirements. Or to put another way, to make sure the move to the cloud or any infrastructure for that matter is an improvement, not just a nice to have. Cloud can be useful if you use it in the right way. So let me share a few pointers of what I believe are important elements when you're adopting the cloud. First, make sure that while you're moving to the cloud and that why you are moving to the cloud and you are moving to the cloud for the right reasons. And once you have the right reasons established, define KPIs and measure the result, or in other words, define SMART goals. And also what's really important and we often see missing is that communicate these goals and these ambitions with your organization and also the people that are in front of the work. I work in large data projects, and in most cases, I will always ask anyone that's in the meeting or anyone that I have a discussion with, do you know why you are moving to the cloud? And everyone, typically in the same company as well, they would have a different reason. And typically that's not the reason why the organization or why the management thinks they are moving to the cloud. Once you decide the cloud is a good fit, the next step is to identify what services you want to move to the cloud, or even better, which services in the cloud you want to use. Focus on the offerings that benefit most from the cloud model. The cloud model is pay per use, scale when you need it, and scale up when you need it, scale out when you need it, and be able to scale back as well. Often these are platform as a service or software as a service solutions. So try to focus on these when you're moving your services to the cloud. If needed, redevelop applications to accommodate for these possibilities, instead of just migrating your old applications to, for example, infrastructure as a service, to just be able to lift and shift, because that wouldn't make any sense and you typically don't get any benefit from the cloud. But you also need to focus on the people as well in this step. You're not changing where the services are located, but you're also changing how to work and how to manage these services. And this means that people must learn new technologies and they must adopt a new way of working. So make sure that you're not moving everything at once, because your people and your staff and your engineers, they need time to see what's actually going on, what this new technology is, The new technology is constantly changing as well. So make sure that we divide the work in small chunks and add new technology when we really need it, instead of upfront making a big design. Another important element to adopt is to provide guidelines and policies instead of becoming a cloud service provider within the cloud. And that's something that we see very often, typically in larger organizations. They are used to restrictions. They would have restrictions in place already. And when they move to the cloud, they want to adopt that same model. But that typically doesn't work well in the cloud. In the cloud, we want to give freedom, but we want to set boundaries. And you will see that once you adopt that pattern, and that's a scary pattern, especially for most companies where they're coming from right now. But if you say you have freedom to do what you want, but these are the boundaries within you can do it, you would see you get a lot more work done because people are much more in control over what they want to build. Instead, they have to wait to what they want to build for somebody to tell them that's okay to build it. Another aspect to consider here is that the cloud is constantly changing. So even if you would have a single organization or a managed IT department that's managing your cloud, it also means that the cloud is so much changing, has so many different changes, that they might not be able to identify what the impact on the organization might be, because they simply cannot know everything that's in the cloud. So you have to divide the work, and then the best way might be to divide the work to the domain, to the people that have the domain knowledge. So if there's a data engineer, he would be the one to know if you need which data components you need. And if you have a network engineer, he's the one that knows which network components to need to use. Another important aspect of the cloud is to fully understand who's responsible for what. And often that is forgotten as well. Because when working with platform services, a lot of the heavy work is done by the cloud vendor, but you are still responsible for access to these resources. And you are still responsible for backup of these resources. Just because you put some data into a storage account somewhere doesn't mean that if somebody else deletes it, this is handled by the platform. It means that if somebody deletes it, you would have to find a way to get it back. You also have to be aware that the cloud is not there at all times. Of course, every cloud vendor promises 3 nines at least, but as much as possible. But that's a promise, and it's not a definite guarantee. So it means that at some point, the cloud will not be available, or parts of the cloud will not be available. You have to incorporate that into your strategy, and you have to be aware that this is definitely the case. This is definitely going to happen. And then the last element, and I think it's the most important element, is to include the business. Because typically a cloud solution or a cloud architecture or whatever you're doing with the cloud is completely different from what you're used to. If you have an on-prem solution, you have to invest in hardware, you have to invest in services, you have to invest in licenses. Maybe you need to build an entire new data center. That's a much longer project, and that's completely different. You have to do that investment, and you do that investment based on some capacity planning or some future prospects. You don't know what you're going to do, so you make some assumptions and then you go. With the cloud, it's different because we can much more have a shorter time to market. We can much faster realize our ideas. We have a small idea, let's build it with a small group of people, do somebody from the business, take an architect, take a developer, and maybe take somebody else that has more Scrum Master type of role or something like that, and then build the solution and see if it works. See if we can prove that this use case, this business case can be solved in this technology, and then verify, is this technology safe and secure and good to use within the organization? And then we can put it into production, and then we move on to the next one. And that's a much easier way to adopt the cloud, and then we are doing it in chunks. And eventually at some point, we might say, okay, we built these 5 solutions, But from these 5 solutions, we see that we are reusing code here. Maybe we could build a new solution, and that would be a next new use case. And then we are going to do that. We don't have to build something for the next 5 years because that's not realistic because the cloud will be completely different in the next 5 years, as it has from the last 5 years as well. Now I see that I'm really fast or have less than I thought I would have. But to me, this is a good thing because this allows us to have a lot of discussion, which I think is very good on this. So yeah, please open up for questions. Let me see if I can take the first one that's there. So that's a question from Martin. What's your take on the famous quote, "There's no cloud, it's just somebody else's computer"? Too short-sighted. Yes, that's a very good question. And it's a term I try to avoid in this talk. But it's very often heard of. If somebody asks, what's the computer? The computer is, or what's the cloud? The cloud is somebody else's computer. To me, that's not the case because that would be too simplistic. And there's a lot of companies that actually approach it like this. And these are the vendors that I talked about that are providing a private cloud to an organization. The cloud is much more service-oriented. It provides services that you can use when you need them, and you remove them when you don't need them, or you stop them when you don't need them. Then you don't pay for them anymore. It's a whole suite of services, different technologies with different possibilities. And so, yeah, just somebody else's computer. That's indeed too far-sighted. Yes. And then the other question is, isn't AWS a direct competitor to Dropbox and their services? And was that one of the reasons to stop using AWS? Or financially challenging for Dropbox to start from scratch? They haven't shared the return on investment. There are some lines in the article there that they know that upfront they would have to invest more. But eventually, a few of the reasons they wanted is the security, to have a tighter control over security, but to have much more control over what they were building. And they had the idea that AWS builds a cloud, a generic cloud. They could do it themselves, and that's something I believe as well, because I don't think that the success from the cloud comes from the potential and the scale that AWS or Microsoft has or Google has. It comes from the new technologies we see today. Solutions like Kubernetes and Docker, they enable these service type oriented workloads. So we see a lot of private clouds enabling this as well by using Kubernetes in their private cloud data centers.
What would you say, Robert, when it comes to, I think the interpretation is definitely that cloud seems to be everywhere and we need cloud for everything. So some companies have the idea that it's a choice between on-prem or cloud, and you have to shift everything over from one to the other. If you were to advise a company on that is looking at that now or that has made the move, how would you say to decide whether the cloud is a must or whether it is indeed a bit of a marketing trap that they are stepping into?
Yeah, and that's a thin line, because it depends on your workload. But the best benefit you would get from the cloud is if you would be able to use the model that's there. So use the pay-per-use model, or if you need, or the same thing is if you need compute power for a limited set of time. So let's say that you are an HR company and you do salary payments, or you calculate salary payments once a month. You only need the compute power at the end of the month, typically. So it wouldn't make sense to invest into a lot of compute capacity for an entire year. It would only make sense to invest into the capacity when you need it. And then even you could invest in a lot more capacity because you need it for a shorter time, and you're only paying for that short time. But we also see companies with large data warehouses and large databases, and they are moving that one to the cloud. But these database compute services run 24/7, and then it becomes a different idea, because then the price point and the price advantage and the scale advantage is a different story, because you're not just moving your resources to the cloud on its own, and how cloud manages workloads is different than how you would manage a workload in your own organization.
Yeah, clear. Also, with regards to, I think there seems to be some people have the idea that we better move everything to the cloud now, because it will be inevitable that we have to, almost as if on-prem will become redundant or not available anymore. Do you see a future where that could be possible, or do you think there will always be a hybrid model?
Well, there's some form of hybrid model. I see a model, and I live in the Netherlands, and what I see there and what I've worked with is a lot of, for example, government ministries, and they're all building their own data centers. That doesn't make sense to me. Why are you the same type of company, don't have any competition going on, you're not competing with each other, why not reuse technology you already have? It makes sense to build it there. But then the discussion opens up, should that then be a public cloud, or should we build our own private cloud that's government-based? And the same is for the ECB, the European Central Bank. Should they not build a private cloud for all the central banks in all the countries? And the same you could apply for hospitals as well. Why should every hospital have its own IT department? Why should every hospital have its own data center? Why not reuse the capacity we already have and then build on top of that? So that's a model that I think is much more realistic to see in the future, where larger organizations share capacity, if they are government-based or they're service-based for the public service-based. But then the smaller companies and the larger enterprises, it will typically be a hybrid scenario, because it doesn't make sense to move that data. And eventually, if you look at the price point, the price advantage wouldn't be that much.
Yeah. No, well, thank you very much. I think we've also answered all the questions. I think in summary, we can say that no, it is not fake news, but you do have to really think about how it suits your organization best, what you're actually doing and what that would look like in the cloud, and then assess the sense of sensibility around it. And it's very much on an individual basis, as you said, when do you need the data? How do you use it? What's your purpose, rather than just going along with the hype? Is that an adequate summary?
Yeah, definitely. And if you want to compare it with something, you can compare it with a rental car and your own car. If I need my car every day, it would make sense to buy a car. If I only need a car once a week, it might make sense to rent a car. And that's the same goes for the cloud. It's fit for purpose. You shouldn't follow the hype, and you should definitely not go to the cloud because somebody else is doing it. You should really make sure that your workload, or the workload that you're trying to run, benefits from the cloud model, and then it will be a big success. But the promise that the cloud will solve all your problems and would be cheaper, especially the one that would be cheaper, that's definitely not true, because I think that the cloud in most scenarios we see with customers is not cheaper. It can be cheaper, but it's not.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I really like that analogy, and I think that's a very good one to end this webinar with, and to keep in mind. If anyone else has any other questions, feel free to email me direct. I will definitely pass them on to Robert. Robert, thank you very much for this wonderful webinar, and I wish you all a great day.
Thank you.